Hi everybody, I'm Dan and this is my Season 2 review for Marvel's Runaways. Needless to say, there's going to be full spoilers for the season, and we're just going to jump into it. I wanted to get to this sooner, but of course Runaways, they had to just go crazy this time and do the whole season coming out at once, and then there was Christmas and New Year's, and then I was sick, and well, here are my thoughts. I thought it was a good season. I thought that it was a nice follow-up to season 1. It was better to me than season 1. That said, I still think that there were some issues. I love the characters so much, and I wish that the storylines and the action and things like that were able to keep up with the quality and the charisma of these actors, and just their chemistry with one another. I really like the show, and I'm going to break down this season review into a few different points here. I'm going to have like my highlights of the season, my pain points of the season. I'm going to talk about like shipping moments. I'm going to give you my MVPs of the season, and I'm going to give you an overall score. So I made this very mathematical for you guys. So let's talk about some of those highlights. First off, I want to talk about Darius and how I think they did a really good job at the start of the season getting me to care about that character. His interactions with Alex really highlighted both of their strengths and made them, they really played off each other well. And I was really impressed by Darius because I didn't care about him at all in season 1. I was like, why is this character here? He seemed kind of shoehorned in, but I think they really gave him a nice layer. His whole family life was interesting. It was really impressive to me that they made me care when he was killed. And that even though he had just, betrayed Alex in a way, the fact that they had Catherine kill him not only made me care about Darius, but it made me care about Catherine on a villain level. It was something that made her stand out on her own, aside from Pride, aside from her husband. And it was the first big, like, what the fuck moment to me of the season. And it was a great point of how we got Alex back into the fold of things. And I just thought that episode where he died was one of the standout moments of the season. And it really felt to me like it heightened the stakes while also giving us some really interesting character development. That also leads into my next highlight, which was Alex and Nico in that episode sort of rekindling their friendship. They have that moment where they're playing Street Fighter, and I thought, like, I don't necessarily like need them to be in a relationship, even though I did like that in season 1. But having them, comfortably become friends again, to me was a really nice highlight of the season. I wish they did more with them as friends, but especially as they both have this sort of leadership qualities in this season, seeing them sort of commiserate and Nico sort of back off of her anger towards him was a really nice, sweet moment. And I think that those two actors play really well off of each other. And I think that's what made this season work so well, is the quiet moments of just like believable human chemistry, and having, the fact that we had this overall thing of them on the run, they're in this hostile space, and letting them all be together more. And I think the show is at its best when you have the group of kids all together with their various clashing personalities. And it's a group that you get invested in. And the fact that they are all on the run this whole season makes that a lot easier to connect with because they become more of a family. Another big highlight of the season for me was Jonah and sort of the evolving Geborim mythology. All the things that we find out more about his past, the sort of past lives reincarnation thing. The more we learn about the religion and about Zavin and all that stuff, and then Jonah being transferred over to Victor, and then sort of that slowly evolving undercurrent in the back half of the season as we realize that more and more of the adults are now taken over by these aliens. And then of course the big interesting cliffhanger of who is the last of the Geborim, who are they, possessing, or whatever you want to call it, I think was a great way to end the season off on a highlight. I think the mythology and the growing alien threat really added something this season, and it was, to me, more engrossing and more exciting than some of the stuff with just like the kids versus the parents. And I think that it's a great way to sort of evolve the show beyond just that idea into something greater, while still it's an easy transition because you have Jonah from the beginning and you have Carolina. I think that it all flowed very nicely, and it's exciting to learn more and more about that stuff. So speaking of Jonah moving over to Victor, we have another highlight for me is Nico killing Jonah. That big moment, I think, was one of their better action scenes. I think that the music was great there in general. I think a highlight of this season is the music. I think that the show does a great job with its selection of songs and the soundtrack and the score. But that Nico moment really was cool, and it was good for the character. I do have some issues with where it went after that, but we'll get back to that in the pain point section. Another big highlight for me was definitely Gert's anxiety issues. And how it was dealt with through her relationship with Chase, but also just showing that, a show like this getting into serious topics like the anxiety, like them actually seeing what homeless people are like, and Gert, facing that. I like that they delve into these bigger topics, and it's not just a surface level superhero thing. And I think that they portrayed Gert's anxiety very well, and the struggle she had, and the fact that she ended up having to go and get medication, and how it was still, recognizably Gert, but it was so heightened. And I feel like, as someone myself who has anxiety issues, I think that they handled it well. And I definitely think, there's room for improvement, but I definitely appreciated that they went there. And I think that having Chase, try to help her through that, not necessarily know how to do it every step of the way, but doing his best, I thought really strengthened their relationship and dynamic. Another definite highlight for me was the whole sort of subsection of the season involving AWOL, and especially his big kidnapping episode, the storming of the castle, if you will, with the kidnapped Livy outside. I thought that was one of the better episodes of the season. I think that it was, high stakes, high tension. How are they going to get out of this? It was, very classic, good, episodic, superhero episode, and she's showing how each of them, Alex was making mistakes, but then he'd come up with a new plan, and their various dynamics and how they work together, and then ultimately the badass moment of Nico with the staff, and it's like, what the fuck happened there? And I guess generally I think that they did a very good job with Nico, which brings me into my MVP segment. Now, Nico definitely is one of my MVPs of the season. I think she had some of the most interesting things to do. I think she consistently had great performances. She does romance well with Carolina. She does the leadership thing well. She struggled with being taken over by the staff. She did, the pain with the parents stuff well. I definitely like seeing her interact with everybody. I liked her conflict with Molly throughout the season, specifically around the Topher stuff. I think they did a really good job with her. I do think there were some issues with the Carolina-Nico relationship in the back half of the season, especially after she kills Jonah. I don't feel like they went as far as they could have with dealing with the undercurrent or like the fallout of her killing somebody. They touched on it a bit, but I don't feel like they dealt with that with the gravitas that it could have been, and it just kind of went into a murky spot. That said, I definitely think that this season made me like Nico more than I ever did before, and I'm excited to see where they go with her in the future. In addition to Nico, my other MVP would be Molly. I think they did a really good job with Molly this season, and she's a tough character because there's definitely times where it's like, oh, she's the young one, and so she screws up and does stupid things and is naive and gullible or whatever. And that can be frustrating. But I feel like they really did a good job this season of balancing that out with her being useful and smart, and really giving the sympathy and the pathos behind her, and really making you care about her and all the things she has to go through with losing more of her family, and then the whole thing with Topher. And then, even I really like how they end out the season with the whole quinceanera stuff. I think they did a really good job with Molly, and it's a character who I think was only okay in season 1, and I think went to a much better level in season 2. So I really liked Molly. Okay, so let's get into some pain points. First off, I feel like I like what they did with Janet generally this season, and I feel like they were trying to make her more likable, and they mostly succeeded. That said, ultimately, she still sticks by Victor despite the fact that he was an abusive husband. And so I feel like they try to make her, become a stronger, more, independent character this season, and yet she still falls back on needing Victor's help a lot more often than I think she should. And it just sort of leaves a bad taste in my mouth. And it feels like bad messaging to send to just leave them in a relationship and to make it sort of seem okay. Like, okay, yes, I understand Victor's being better until he's possessed or whatever. But the fact that they are still trying to become a family and all that feels a little bit messed up. And I just wasn't a big fan of that on a representation level. And that also guides me into my other pain point of the fact that all of the Asian people, specifically Nico, Robert, and Tina, all know martial arts of some kind. Feels a little racist. I mean, I'm not, tell me if you think I'm wrong there, but the final fight there where they're all squaring off in this martial artsy battle felt a bit much to me. I'm not saying it wasn't cool, I'm not saying I didn't enjoy it, but it really did stick out to me on a show where I do think that they have a really great Asian character with Nico. I felt like that was not well thought out. I also had some issues with Leslie's storyline, the whole sort of cult storyline and her subplot and spending so much time on her there. I just really didn't care very much. I didn't understand why, when she was dealing with so much stuff, she wouldn't just lie and say, you know what, I'm wrong, you guys convinced me, I do believe in this again, or whatever. That was never really, she never even tried to do that. Also, Frank's turn to being a complete villain felt really quick and not totally believable to me, given what they had built up that character to be before now. I guess it was interesting, and I think the actor did a good job with it, but I didn't really get it, and I didn't know how much of it was supposed to be him, because it was at the time where a lot of people were becoming aliens and stuff, and so I was like, oh, is he controlled by an alien? It was very confusing and weird to me, and I just didn't totally buy it, but maybe that's just me. Another thing I wasn't a huge fan of, I mentioned earlier, is sort of the back half of Carolina and Nico's relationship. I like those two characters. I like those actresses together. I think they play off each other very well. I did feel like after Nico killed Jonah, things got kind of weird. And actually, in some ways before that, because I thought that there should have been more blowback to Carolina for the fact that she was lying to everyone for so long, and that she has been going and seeing Jonah, and that, all that stuff, especially given how intensely Nico reacted to Alex in the previous season. It felt like she did this big thing, it was a big thing, and then suddenly, right away, it was forgiven because Nico did a worse thing. And then it was even weird after that, where I was like, okay, yes, I understand that Carolina was upset with Nico, but she wasn't as upset as I feel like she should have been. And it was still kind of it was like, oh, we had a fight, as opposed to you fucking killed my dad. I didn't feel like it, again, was given the gravitas that it should have been given. And I feel like maybe you're supposed to be like, well, as a viewer, I realized that Jonah's still around, but she didn't know that. And it just felt very off to me how quickly they were kissing again, and we're getting over to this jokey Zavin thing. And I did enjoy some of that stuff, but it just felt a little bit blundered. I felt like they treated that just any sort of teen argument that then was fixed, as opposed to a really serious issue. So that was a pain point for me. That said, if we're going to talk about shipping moments in general, I do think that Carolina and Nico had a number of cute moments. I did enjoy the stuff when Zavin came in, as weird and oddball as Zavin is. I think having that interplay of Nico being jealous and all that stuff was fun and will lead to some interesting stuff going forward. Generally speaking, I didn't get that much out of Alex and Livy, I believe her name was. They were fine, they were cute, but I was always I never expected her to be a long-term character, and I felt like that was clear from the beginning. Gert and Chase, I feel like in a lot of ways had the best stuff this season, but it also was a little bit too hot and cold for me by the end of the season. I think they had some great back and forth, some great understandable arguments. I especially loved Chase calling out Gert when she was being selfish and called Janet. I thought that whole back and forth was great. I just think that when we got to the end and Chase left and Gert got all upset again, it felt like one back and forth too many for me. And I'm just I just want them to be good for more than half an episode. And especially given that they had so many back and forth just in this season, I can only imagine there being another 7 of them next season. And I feel like they need to find a way to not have it be so quickly like, oh, we're good. No, we're not good. Oh, we're good. I'm mad at you. No, now I'm mad at you. And even though generally speaking, I think the dialogue was good, the chemistry was great, and they did a lot more interesting character stuff with these two characters this season than last. I definitely think that they kind of just took a whole will they won't they like 6 seasons of Friends and just put it all in one season, and it was getting to be a bit much by the end there. I'm sure some people will disagree with me on some of this, but that's my feeling. All right, overall, what did I think of season two? I think if I had to give it like a grade, I would give it a B. I think that this was a solid season, a real solid, just B, maybe B plus. Very enjoyable. I love the binge. I can't wait for more. I'm glad that it ended on like a big cliffhanger moment. I do think Alex is the Gaborum other one. Um, but I definitely think that there was some unevenness in the writing. I think that it took too long on certain aspects. That said, I think that they did really nice little mini arcs with the AWOL stuff, with Topher. And I think that I really prefer this on the run season over last year. And I'm really digging the show. I just think it hasn't like fully hit its stride yet. And I feel like it can be better than it is. And I hope that it gets there. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. What did you agree with me on? What did you disagree with me on? What are you excited about for next year? Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you're doing okay.